and she's tremendously popular. You've seen how she's even adopted the namaste when she's not only greeting our Prime Minister, but other dignitaries of the world as well. So she's really been impacted by her 2 visits to India and by the very strong rapport that she had with Prime Minister Modi. So she is now playing a very crucial role in the EU. We've seen that how in the recent European Parliament elections, there's been a swing to the far right, which has really set a lot of disturbances, very, very important concerns have been generated by this all over the EU. President Macron has ordered fresh elections, and we've seen many other countries were so concerned by this. But certainly the Prime Minister of Italy is not, because she's absolutely on that side herself. So she is a very important interlocutor at this time, and she's had a good meeting with our Prime Minister, very important exchange of views. I think it's going to be a very important anchor for carrying the India-EU relationship forward, as well as the bilateral relationship as well.
Sure. With that, also let me welcome Dr. Swasti Rao with a namaste. Dr. Rao, since we are talking about the namaste that Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni welcomed our Prime Minister with. But, talking about India's crucial role at the G7 summit and at the global table, Dr. Swasti, one of the reasons is also to counter China's expansionist policy. And the G7 has been putting up a united front against the Chinese economic and military actions. How do you see India playing that role moving forward?
Well, agree. A very good evening to you, Shreya. As far as containing China is concerned, yes, first of all, the way India likes to project it semantically, we always say that we are not there to contain anybody. We are there to sort of, protect our own interests, etc., etc. So that's the official, stand we take. This is much more, okay, so there are 2 ways in which I think I see the cooperation panning out with the Europeans, okay, particularly. You already mentioned, I was listening to Ambassador Sikri when she was telling about, how things have panned out in Italy, etc. So, well, one of the things that is happening is that the Europeans are very mindful of diversifying away from China. So, when they're diversifying away from China, the one area that then stems out for India then is, of course, the area of investments. And we have been also worried about why the China +1 investments are not really reaching India, are going elsewhere in Vietnam and Bangladesh and so on. Now, one of the reasons why they have not been finding their way to India is concerning. I think the Prime Minister and the government is also back, and they have a very clear agenda in terms of how to sort of iron out those economic differences. For example, how can you better improve the ecosystem so that you become a more investment-friendly country? We don't give freebies like Vietnam does, so obviously that's another thing. But that's one of the parts. Okay, the other thing is also about ramping up manufacturing in India. And of course, you know that the government has also come out with different kinds of PLI, incentive schemes to actually ramp up manufacturing and how to sort of make in India the centerpiece of how we want to take our manufacturing and our embeddedness in the global supply chains in the future. That's one part of it. The other part is the security domain. I want to talk about it a little bit as well, because when it comes to the security domain, I think one of the regions where our understanding of security and our understanding of how to enhance security really sort of converges well with the Europeans as the maritime domain. And, that is also one area where I need to underscore that we and the Europeans have much in common, because unlike what the US and UK stand for, which is a more offensive or more, I would say a more offensive posture in the maritime domains, India and the other European players like the EU itself and France, etc., they share a more multipolar view, of security in the seas. And as a result, they want to strengthen defensive posturing. And for that, if you see that India has been on board, of course, there have been the bilateral, joint exercises. Of course, those are there. But when it comes to upholding a more defensive posture at sea, I genuinely see that there's more convergence between India and European actors. And one of that is going to be around sharing maritime domain awareness. And in fact, one of the things now that the EU is working on is something called the critical maritime route security, and they are going to be coming out with an updated version of that, the Cremario 3. And actually, India and Cremario 3 of the EU have can have a lot of common by way of sharing more information, can by way of sharing more enabling mechanisms to share the MTA. Okay, and that is also one of the reasons why you see that India has been more easily on board on EU-related missions such as the EU NAVFOR mission, the EU Naval Force mission, such as Operation Atalanta or the Operation Aspides more recently. And then there's also the coordinated maritime presence, another kind of an EU tool which talks about bolstering, defensive posture in the seas. So talking, and then there are also other host of options.
So clearly, maritime holds a lot of importance.
Yeah.
And of course, the stability and the peace of the Indo-Pacific region. Ambassador Sikri, if we talk about the challenges that, the G7 as well as, taking India into account as well, might face ahead, what would they be in which sectors?
Well, I think the economic one is certainly a very, very important challenge. I think the condition of the economy now, I just mentioned about the petrodollar deal having now finally being a thing of the past. We do not know what impact it's likely to have. So this economic challenge is very major. And for the G7, whenever they meet and discuss, this is very, very important. So I think that this is something they're going to look at very carefully. The maritime challenge, I think, is very important. And the EU itself is looking at a new policy in the Indo-Pacific. They're now looking at having a strong policy, and they do see India as a key partner in their formulation and execution of the policy toward the Indo-Pacific. So I think that the discussion on the Indo-Pacific on maritime security is going to be very important. I think the environmental issues, the EU always attaches to the highest importance, and we in India have kept our promises. We are a unique country to have kept our promises made at the COP meetings, and this is unique for us. We've also taken a great initiative on the International Solar Alliance and other such issues, and we can certainly talk a lot about this in the EU context. And finally, I think on the two issues that our Prime Minister is addressing the outreach summit on is on artificial intelligence and the energy infrastructure, and we're going to talk about our advances in digital payment structures, the DPI. So I think that these are issues where India has a lot to give, has a lot to talk about, is willing to share its technology, and is also wanting to hear from the EU countries on the economic aspect, on how they plan to tackle the economic crises that are ahead of us. With the EU as a whole, India is looking to, revitalize its relationship, finalize an FTA with them, talk about the Trade and Technology Council that we'd like to have with them. So there are a lot of items to be discussed and on the agenda, as it were, but I would put the economy ahead of all of them. And from our side, we're going to talk about counterterrorism. This is going to be very important from our side. We always try to seek a consensus on counterterrorist issues.
Yeah, we'll have to see, the details, of course, are still trickling in. And one of the most interesting visuals, of course, was Pope Francis there meeting Prime Minister Modi once again. And Pope Francis leading the talks on artificial intelligence. That's going to be interesting to see, as well as the fact what PM says on AI. I'll leave it there. Dr. Swasti Rao and Ambassador Veena Sikri, thank you very much to both you ladies for joining us on Mirror.